Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Sneha Malhotra. I'm Program Associate Director, Energy Innovation and Tech, WRI India. So my topic for today's presentation is charting a path to green shipping. Uh, as also mentioned by our keynote speaker, over 80% of the international trade volume is handled by marine transport, and it is the backbone of global economy and trade. So I'll not delve more into it, but we have to be careful of the fact that approximately 3% of GHG emissions are being emitted by the sector, and it could also rise to 17% if they are left unchecked. Also, because of the expansion of global trade, marine fuel demand is expected to double by 2030. And obviously, the ecosystem is quite aware of it. So, allow me a minute and please bear with this complicated looking graph because it forms the core of our calculation, our discussion today, and analysis. So, to address the emission from large ocean going ships, the International Maritime Organization, or IMO, has introduced a net zero framework. It was finalized in April 2025. It introduces a mandatory greenhouse gas fuel intensity standard along with the GHG pricing mechanism, targeting vessels over 5,000 gross tonnage. So that's an important figure, 5,000 gross tonnage. The framework establishes progressive targets for reduction carbon intensity in marine fuels and implements a tiered credit system to facilitate the compliance. Now it's a tiered credit system, and as we can say, it has two levels. One is the base target level, and another one is the more stricter, the direct compliance target. And it is to be noted that they have been both benchmarked against the GFI of 93.3 grams CO2 equivalent per megajoule. Little more data, and then we'll go to the analysis. So here we can see that any emission above direct compliance target incur $100 per ton CO2 equivalent, while exceeding the base target are charged $380 per ton CO2 equivalent. So compliance can be achieved by either reducing emissions, purchasing remedial units from the IMO Net Zero Fund, or transferring surplus units to other vessels. If you can see at the extreme right of the graph, there we have the IMO Net Zero Fund. So IMO Net Zero Fund will collect contribution from ship emissions and use the revenue to reward low emission vessels, support innovation and infrastructure in development countries, and fund training and tech transfer. One of the other very famous measures taken globally is the green shipping corridor. So decarbonization efforts are further galvanized by the creation of these green shipping corridors. They have some strategic advantages. Some of them have proximity to fuel hubs and favorable economics. So globally, as of October 2024, around 62 green shipping corridors were announced, and 6 have already reached a development stage, crossing the preparatory stage. Here, from our literature review, we understood that methanol is winning, and it is prominent in around 18 projects. Just one more global measure that I would like to talk about is adoption of alternative fuels. So we have global alternative fuels such as LNG, LPG, methanol, green hydrogen, green ammonia, and batteries. And they are the key enablers for achieving the target. At the moment, you can see from the graph that LNG currently leads the transition due to its maturity and existing infrastructure. Methanol and ammonia are also rapidly evolving. Hydrogen is currently at a nascent stage, but it holds a long-term potential. And right now, batteries are playing a great role in hybrid systems and short sea shipping. Analyzing the scenario back home. So, if we talk about the fleet scenario of India, as of December 2024, we have around 1,500 vessels, and of the total fleet, 32% are engaged in overseas trade, and this accounts for 88% of the total gross tonnage. And that is how important the IMO regulations are going to be. Among registered or flagged vessels in India, 489 are deployed for international trade, of which 313 vessels are above 5,000 gross tonnage. So now, definitely, we are not saying that the policies are not in place. They are, but we analyze that. If we talk about Maritime India Vision 2030 and Maritime Amrit Kal Vision 2047, they are efforts towards sustainable shipping, focusing on carbon neutral ports and alternative fuels. But the efforts are largely domestic rather than international. So they are quite insufficient at the moment given the IMO's impending regulation. Just to stress on an important data, that with the IMO's net zero framework starting in 2028 and its non-compliance, about 64% of Indian vessels in international trade will be exposed to direct financial risk, highlighting the need for comprehensive decarbonization, including retrofitting vessels, investing in green fuels, and setting richer standards for new builds. So we have begun with the preliminary analysis of how the IMO regulations are going to impact the total cost of ownership of these ships. So to understand that, we have compared 4 fuels pathways: VLSFO, LNG, green methanol, and green ammonia. The calculation looks at 4 components: the initial investment or capex, the operating expenses over the vessel's life, the cost of carbon pricing depending on fuel emission, and the salvage value at the end of life. So for this analysis, we have assumed that the ship has a lifespan of 25 years, and there are various kind of ships which were eligible for the analysis. But right now, for the paucity of time, I'll be concentrating on very large crude carrier, or VLCC as we call it. Also, in the table below, you can see that based on the net zero framework of IMO, we have tried to build a scenario and we have extrapolated it to 2050 to actually analyze that how these cost drivers shape the relative competitiveness of different fuels. So these are the preliminary results, and we do understand that it needs fine-tuning. Even the regulations are still evolving. But the important thing which I would like to mention here is that we can see a steady upward trend in TCO over the period for conventional fuels like LSFO and LNG. So it can be safely said that the operational cost of using conventional fuel increases, making them progressively more expensive. While if we talk about e-methanol and e-ammonia, they display a gradual decline in the TCO. The most interesting highlight of the graph is that in the mid-2040s, green fuels are projected to become more cost-effective than conventional fuels, marking a key turning point for maritime industry. A little more analysis from our model, and I would really like you to concentrate on the graph on RHS, which actually gives a good number of why we should be adopting green fuels. So for LSFO, carbon costs are projected to account for nearly 49% of TCO by 2050, while LNG reaches around 45%. So the widening gap in carbon cost share between conventional and green fuel underscores a key strategic insight, showing that transitioning to low carbon alternative is essential not only to meet the decarbonization target, but also to maintain long-term cost competitiveness in the maritime sector. So we also have a representation today from panelists on DG shipping, and it's a kind of analysis we put in that what are the opportunities for India if we comply, and what are the risks if we don't comply. So if I want to talk of opportunity, I'll try to link it with NGHM. We already have an ambition of producing 5 MMT of green hydrogen by 2030, and then this mission can help us in achieving nearly 28 MMT of ammonia and 26.3 MMT of methanol, and they both may qualify under the incentives for IMO's GFI reward system. If we talk about non-compliance, obviously, as a sovereign country, India may choose to not be a signatory, but the non-compliance could lead to significant consequences, including denial of port entry at signatory states. And for me, I think the shocking thing would be the reduced competitiveness in the various trade commodities like steel, aluminium, coal, and others. So this is the work we have done so far, and I'll just take a second to say what future work looks like. So we want to better evaluate additional alternative fuels and identify cost-effective options. We would also like to assess green shipping corridor and extend the analysis with corridor-specific data. And we would definitely like to look at the economic and strategic implications on India's commodity trade and export competitiveness. Once we have reached a substantial research, we would like to work with the Ministry of Shipping and Transport and also recommend some pilot project, develop policy inputs, and highlighting financing pathways to support India's maritime decarbonization journey. Can I please have those 3 questions displayed?
Pangis.
Thank you, Sneha, for setting the context. So, I will call out each name. So, I would like everyone to welcome our speaker with the loudest round of applause. So, Shri Gopi Krishna, engineer and ship surveyor, DG Shipping. Shri Rajiv Nair, President, Institute of Marine Engineers, India. And Mr. Jagbanta, Principal and Director, RMI India. Yeah. Sneha, please join the stage. So now, Pawan, stage is yours. Okay.
Thank you, Utsav, and thank you, Sneha. I wanted to, before jumping into the comments on the questions that I have for you, which are listed, these 3 questions, right? What concrete steps is India taking? But I wanted to start off with Mr. Gopi Krishna. The 2025 new rules have come out, right? The maritime rules. And just wanted to get what is your view on the regulations and the systems that are coming in place, and how do you see that India is gearing up to really prep for this kind of a disruption that's really going to come in the whole shipping industry? So I really want you to touch upon that, and also Mr. Rajiv Nair subsequently to really talk about that. Yeah.
First of all, thanks a lot for inviting us for this discussion. Connect Karo by WRI India, especially connecting the waves and wings. The first round of discussions, the first session, very essentially connects with this. Well, I was thinking why we have not participated in the first session.
Actually, we combined session.
Yes, because many of these discussions take place in IMO as well. What are all the discussions which take place in ICAO takes place in IMO as well. We are all fighting for the same thing. Sustainability with common factor. Having said that, we are all in the quest of green fuels. So what is that green fuel that is going to be for the future in the transportation sector? Yes, of course, 3% of the global emissions are coming from shipping. Comparatively, a very less proportion, but still, the work carried out by IMO in the GHG reduction is in a big way. Having said that, the IMO 2023 GHG strategy is very, very, very stringent, I would say, in comparison to the national strategy we have, the net zero emission by 2070. But whereas IMO GHG strategy goes by or around 2050. So 20 years, very large gap. But we have to pace up. That is what required if we want to be in the international business. Having 90% of the world, Indian trade by volume revolving around shipping, it is very essential for us to be in the pace, and also India being a developing economy. So, as far as GHG strategy is concerned, from our end, the net zero fund, yes, it is going to be there. So we want our share, the developing countries' share. As a developing economy, we cannot put all the load on the consumers. So therefore, the right proportion is required. The share of revenue share out of the pricing mechanism, because this is the having both technical and economic element. The GHG, the technical element has to be met with the GFI, whereas the economic element revolves around the revenue share. Because where the trade is taking place, the share has to be proportionate. With a major line share of trade happening in India, we would like to have the more share that we are not going to use it for other purpose, other sector, but for developing the zero fuels, zero emission fuels, zero carbon fuels, or near zero emission fuels. All these fuels, GHG fuels, are to be developed. R&D has to take place. It requires a high capital cost, and the ports are to be developed. All these requires a lot of finance, which this capital will help us in achieving those targets. So, having said that, India is the first country to take part in IMO Voyage 2050, which is essentially covering all the aspects, how to connect, how to develop India. So the first country, as a first country, we have developed our national action plan. The first phase has got completed. The second phase, we are in the second phase. Being a pilot country, India is working on the IMO GHG, the voyage accelerator also. So therefore, we are on the pathway. Taking that model, we need to work out for the other ports as well. The first port has been identified as, the JNPT, and thereafter this has to be spread across all the major ports. So this is my first reflections on your question. Thank you.
Mr. Raju, I wanted to bring you on the to have you please share your reflections on with this recent regulations that are in place, and also in the second round, then we can come to the analysis that Sneha was talking about. Yeah.
Thanks, and good day to all, and thank you for having us here. Just a bit of background is that finally, what is different in the IMO approach? Mr. Gopi very correctly pointed out that this has a technical as well as an economic element. Now, the economic element is why was it needed? That remains the fundamental question, because technically, this is the third strategy which came 23-28. Net zero has been going on for a long time. We have had various measures, technical measures, which brought about GHG reduction into focus, and not purely CO2, but overall GHG reduction. So the one factor which came out is that at some stage transition has to take place. There is no way that transition does not take place. And a lot of studies were presented which showed that the transition, the later you do it, the more expensive it becomes. And humanity is paying the price for it. We are seeing it around. It's a price possibly you and I are also paying for the economic issues, for the environmental issues which we are facing. So that triggered that what is inhibiting the transition is basically the price differential between the alternative fuels, whether it be at the capex level on the ships in technology adoption, or at the opex level of a higher value of the alternate fuels. And thus, the need for the economic element came in, which in this October, mid of October, we have the extraordinary session at MEPC. That is when the world will again get together, the maritime nations will get together to adopt it. I don't know if it will be a plain simple run through, because it has implications which have been pointed out especially by US and a lot of oil producing countries. in the Middle East. So whether it will translate immediately or there are some roadblocks, we'll come to know in a matter of, I guess, another 45 days. It starts in mid-October. So the major difference is coming in is that the economic element is also going to have an impact on everybody. And very correctly pointed out, we are a developing country. So those are the things which we as India have to take care, that we do have the principle of CBDRRC enshrined in even the strategy. It is there. That should be there. Why should a developing country take a hit on its growth potential by contributing and not get a differentiated treatment? Is what would be in the future policies, at least from India's standpoint. So I hope I am able to address part of it.
No, no, Mr. Rajiv, you bring an interesting perspective. Jagmat, I wanted to loop you in and also comment on Mr. Rajiv is talking about, right? Like, yeah, please.
So let me take the alternate route and not talk about why is it challenging for a developing country. And Mr. Raju pointed out all the tension right now. The US's stance is potentially changing with the new administration. This is quite a bit of a dicey moment for this. But I'm going to look at like why it is strategic for India to jump on this bandwagon and actually try to become a leader. And it has to do with the fact that you have some of the basic building blocks for some of the most competitive green or near green fuel for marine sector coming out in the country. And our national hydrogen mission, the way it's designed, really made that happen. So I'm going to build off from what Sachin left the previous round about the ammonia tenders. This price point, no one in the world imagined seeing it. Certainly, we invest a lot in hydrogen production cost model, and it beat our hydrogen cost production model. Well, it matches up a little bit to a large extent. Of course, it is top loaded with a lot of subsidy that the government is providing as a part of the mission. But that price point essentially makes us the most globally competitive. At the margin, starts competing with gray ammonia already. And that is essentially where the first advantages starts coming in. Second, if marine goes green, the location of Indian strategic port, VOC Kandla, is such that if your major entrepôt like Singapore, major bunkering hub like Singapore needs to go green, they need that supply of green molecules from somewhere. And we are so well positioned for that. And that is essentially where this opportunity is not something that India should take lightly. India needs to double down. Where certain strategic reflection on challenges, and I don't want to comment so much on the IMO, I mean, DJ Shipping and Mr. Rajiv will probably have a lot more insights onto this. But where I would point out is to do with the fact that like this methanol ammonia debate that is happening. And to a large degree, I think the world is going to converge towards both. I think methanol in the near-term run, as the number is showing, the ship log is probably on the methanol side. But in India's case, the convergence of the trade opportunities around green ammonia and the preparedness of some of the early ports on that, it is going to start favoring ammonia in the longer run. The second has to do with the lack of biogenic CO2, or the fact that we don't have a supply chain that's robust enough to unlock that. That's going to plateau our ability to leapfrog into the green methanol space as a supplier. But the other thing is like India always underplayed its marine its advantage in the marine sector. I think the government is really going gung-ho this time, all the way from shipbuilding to greening up the ports to how it's positioning its major ports, right? And this, while the initial transition is going to be as a supplier of net zero fuel to many of these ports, there is a universe where if India is ambitious enough, you are going to see the emergence of a bunkering hub. Albeit, of course, like it's going to be a market share play between what Singapore will be doing, Fujairah will be doing. But there is, I think, geographically as well, a very big space for India. And that's something that that's my reflection on where the opportunity space in all of this is right now.
Thank you, Jagmant. I think very interesting perspective. Arjun, you have joined us online. Can you hear us?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Arjun, go ahead. Just, I don't know if you were able to see the presentation that Sneha had presented. But I just wanted you to comment on 2, 3 aspects, right? One is any specific insight that you have from what Sneha showed, and also what Jagbanta was also saying, that ammonia will be first, and then methanol would be much late. Sorry, it is the other way around. Would be methanol will be first and ammonia in the long term. But just wanted to hear your perspective as you see how the national green hydrogen mission actually kind of favors some of this uptake in the market, some of the reflections and the work that you have been doing in this space.
Sure. Thank you, Kunja. Firstly, let me thank the WRI team for having organized this session today. I wish I could be there in person, but because of exigencies, I'm connecting from home. So nice to meet everyone virtually, many old friends and some new. Arjun Mehta, I'm a director handling growth and programs at GH2 India. We are a not-for-profit industry association working across the entire green hydrogen spectrum, right from technology manufacturers, to, of course, policymakers, to producers of green hydrogen-based fuel, and then down to consumers. Now, I think the SAF session just before this, which I had the opportunity to listen to most of it, and the shipping are very, very interesting when it comes to moving from heavy fuel oil, from diesel, from kerosene-based hydrocarbons to greener fuels, right? Now, there are technological, regulatory, and economic challenges, which I think most of these speakers have highlighted. So I won't repeat some of those points for the intention of being succinct. But I think it's important to raise a few of these gaps. One, as Mr. Rajiv Nair as well was, very eloquently saying in terms of, the IMO regulations expected next, in 45 days' time, with the DG Shipping report. I think some of the programs that the Ministry of Shipping have come out with are quite progressive in the sense, Harit Sagar, for example, the green, the identification of the green tugs program, identification and allocation for the green hydrogen hubs at ports, for instance. We have 3 such in India, which everyone knows about, are all very progressive. So if you think of the possibility of essentially India transforming itself from a relatively shy shipping entity to a possible shipping major, there are a few important things that we need to do. One is the alignment with what the IMO is doing. The first, most critical thing is in terms of policy and regulatory alignment. We have the GHG reduction norms set out in MEPC 83, which hopefully in the same shape, if not too diluted, be ratified in October. Our domestic policies on green fuel for the shipping space certainly have to align. So that's obviously, the first key step. Second, when it comes to the technology angle, that's several other aspects are there, but the first is on alignment of the policy. The second is on technicals. Again, following from what our colleague at DG Shipping was saying, Sneha's presentation as well, the fuel pathway is dependent both on technicals as well as on economic, but the third aspect is on availability of fuel. So let me touch upon these 3 points. The first, Gunja, answering your question, Sneha's presentation, the pathway to move from heavy fuel oil down to greener fuels might involve LNG as well, might involve biofuels, but certainly will involve methanol, which technology experts, unlike myself, are saying that moving from diesel to methanol is a lot easier. The retrofits required to move from diesel to ammonia is significant. In my previous organization prior to GH2 India at Fortescue, I've personally seen, the first green ammonia ship in the world, where they have successfully retrofitted 2 diesel engines to ammonia-fired engines, and that's docked in Singapore right now and has been traveling the globe. Now, these are great pilots, but the capex involved, the technological challenges involved, the retrofits involved, moving from a conventional fuel to ammonia is a lot more complex than moving from conventional fuel to methanol. And therefore, I agree with that pathway where methanol first and then ammonia might be the way to go when it comes to greener fuels. The third aspect is on economics. Of course, not just India, but most of the rest of the world are economically sensitive. Everyone wants to lower their costs down. The renewable energy purchase obligation in India was not particularly successful in the sense it is not because of RPO that solar took up. It is not because of mandates that green fuel adoption will be taken up. It is because of an economic and a business case. if we prove for it to be scaled up and cost competitive, even with the carbon tax that was, or let's say the GHG reduction norms that were highlighted in the IMO slide as well by Sneha, with that, the economy case has to prove itself. Otherwise, it's not going to scale up significantly. And the fourth, I'll close with this point, is on the availability itself of the green fuels. The good thing is we have 7,000 odd kilometers of a coastline, 6,000 plus on the mainland itself, and then the islands. Using that extensive coastline, using our fuel sources, our imports of ammonia, for example, production of methanol and ammonia using our vast renewable energy resources are all absolutely great opportunities at the coast. So if we have the logistical challenge of transportation inland of liquid methanol, liquid ammonia be limited, that is perhaps the best way to go, where we have the long coastline being used and leveraged to our advantage as well, to scale up the production of green fuel. I'll stop here, but regulatory alignment, economic business case, technical challenges, and availability and scale up of fuel supply. 4 points from my side.
Thank you, Arjun. I think very crystal clear. But I just wanted to again bring back Mr. Gopi Krishna on this. I think 2 points. And also, if we can bring back the questions that we had. One is, I think Arjun was talking about this whole alignment with IMO. So, where do you see that our national strategy aligning with the IMO strategy? I think that's one question that I wanted to ask both Mr. Nair and Mr. Krishna. And the other is this whole economics, which you also touched upon, right? Where do you see really just talking about? Because we keep hearing about, the ability to do the pilots, the pathways, but this transition seems like quite longer. Do you think that we even are talking about 2050, 2060, or are we really saying that, this is like a very long transition that we are talking about both in aviation and marine sector?
Thanks for the question, as well as the inputs from Arjun. The government is very aggressive. It is not shy. Having said that, we had our green shipping conclave in 20th February of this year, wherein we had several discussions on green fuels, green finance, green ports, and international collaboration, which is, yes, everything green. Of course, what apparels we were wearing also was green. Yes, of course. Having said that, 3 important strategic documents were released during that, the conclave. The first one is the draft consultative document towards national green shipping policy, because before that we did not had a policy, green shipping policy or national maritime policy on our own for the country. But during that point of time, the draft consultative document was released. That is number 1. Number 2, to address all the issues that were mentioned of now, taking into consideration of all those things, a future fuel strategy document also was released. That was in combination with IRS, Indian Register of Shipping. The DG Shipping took a major role along with our stakeholders and released that draft document. That is number 2. That talks about the fuel mix which is necessary to meet all the requirements of net zero by 2050. So, green fuels are necessary to meet, but how do we meet? How do we meet that? That is very important. So, there is a need of R&D and technological innovations, which is effectively captured by the same one other document released during the same conclave, that is IOC Smart. It not only talks about the India, but also the Indian Ocean region Smart, IOC Smart, that is Smart Solution. There are several verticals in that. So the IOC Smart, that will be established in Mumbai. Right now, we are in the process of setting up the IOC Smart. So that will take care of the sustainability part of this transportation, which we are discussing about doing it in a sustainable manner. So the R&D part, the training part, for all taking into consideration of all the fuels, considering ammonia we are talking about, it is very toxic, ammonia is toxic. Then taking your methanol, it has got a low flash point, So all these requires safety codes and again green hydrogen, flammability. So taking all this into consideration, there is a necessity of training, necessity of codes, ISO code requirement. The other guidelines are to be developed. If you want to develop our bunkering facilities, that are all to be, facilitated. So the connecting the green ports with the right, if we're talking about green corridors, all those things. We require all these facilities as an ecosystem has to be developed. Green ecosystem must be developed. So therefore, these three documents are essentially covering all the aspects which are required for sustainable green, the ecosystem which is necessary in meeting all these requirements, the global commitments as well as the national commitments, and also the IMO requirements. So this is what my reflection is there for your second question. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll try to address your transition point. That is one of the key things why the economic element is there, to speed up the transition. You heard the questions. Availability of fuel. When will fuel be available? When there's a business case, when there is sufficient investment and a person sees that yes, there's a market for this, automatically fuels will come. That is the thought process. That's why the economic element was plugged in. Technology, whether it is ammonia or whether it is methanol, both are there. And claims from, we heard about the Fortescue vessel. It was there in River Thames when MEPC 83 was going on. And it was showcased to the people attending MEPC 83. Japan, I believe, has a tug which has been running on ammonia. So it is not that the technology is an issue, but that comfort that yes, this will be available, the higher investment is justified, is triggered by these economic elements, which is their purpose, that if you continue polluting, you pay, and the more the time passes, the payment becomes more, and if you don't, you get a benefit. So that is what was intended to give the signal to the fuel production industry, the technology producers, as well as the ship owners to move into ordering. Already most of the present day orders are moving towards dual fuel engines, including India's vision, though the tender is not yet out, but I do believe that the specifications are towards a dual fuel engine. So either as a ready vessel or as a fully ready vessel, means ready means it still has got some work to do, but all the fuel tanks and all are being incorporated as we speak in most of the new building orders now going on. And possibly the lower rate of new building is also because people are watching what happens in the coming few days on at MEPC, and then I think you'll see a spurt in ordering, which will be towards dual fuel. People will build that capability. Yes, even today, we are so used to fossil fuel, we are so comfortable. Plus, of course, ammonia doesn't burn without a pilot fuel. So you will still need the pilot fuel across. Every alternate fuel has got its some issues. It will require to be proven. We will learn during that experience. Therefore, the dual fuel will go on before it reaches a stage where hopefully at some time it will be a single alternate fuel. But today, I think the way forward of dual fuel is already well into progress. And just for your IMO regulation coming, I think at least what discussions, including interministerial, they are all aligned to, we are committed to reducing our emissions. So I don't think there is any walking away from that.
No, this is very helpful. Jagbanta, if you wanted to come in, one was also in this whole dual fuel thing that Mr. Nair was talking about. If you had any reflections around that.
I think I will stretch that a little bit because of the point I was trying to make and pointing on the third question. Also, like plugging in a little bit of some of the work that we are starting to do. So, firstly, I think we did this maths. We're doing some work with Ministry of Shipping, supporting them on corridors design, and both inland corridors as well as international corridors. And what we realize is that you can't do inland corridor without international corridor, because there is no cost advantage that volume of shipping that is interland is going to give. So the price decline needs to come from volume, and that's essentially where this whole debate or this approach needs to be thought through in a system level, international plus domestic. The second part is that the cost, and this is where like the room is of course full of shipping people. I'm trying to stretch it because the cost decline on any of these fuel is to do with volume. And the magical thing about these new crop of e-fuels is that the parent molecule is the same, it's hydrogen. And there's a whole like mission that starts looking at hydrogen as a feedstock as well as energy molecule for many industrial sector, non-industrial as well. Now, this is where our RMI's way to think about it is a clusters and corridors approach. And that's essentially where, while the port guys and the shipping guys are quite micro to a degree in how they're approaching it, you need to macro it out and see, is there an opportunity space to think about them as a collective conduit for, clustering, fertilizer plants, chemical units, and actually take advantage of the synergy of volume that's starting to emerge. And that will give the cost decline advantages that we are hoping to see. This ammonia tender price point was because we aggregated the demand. It wasn't a single demand, right? Now, we did this work that Mr. Sonowal had released, I think, 2 months ago or so, and it was completely to do with assessing the port readiness for green transition. Our look at it was not from a shipping perspective, but our look at it was exactly to the point, like, is the ecosystem ready for that transition? And there, the idea of a common user, infrastructure starts emerging. If you imagine these as hubs and clusters, there's going to be a lot of common user infrastructure that the shipping guys would want to share with the chemical guys, would want to share with the fuel supply guys, which can be the electricity poles, the wires, transmission cables that needs to be stretched out, the storage tanks that needs to be co-developed. Essentially, to a large degree, is the same molecule. Ammonia goes into ships, ammonia goes into fertilizer by the end of it, right? Methanol, you need the biogenic CO2 to make urea, you need biogenic CO2 to make methanol. Now, that's where like opportunity space for further government intervention starts lying, is how do we finance this? Because if you put it onto the private sector, that cost pass-through is going to be quite prohibitive, I would say. If there's a way to spread the cost, whether it's through a PPP design, through cost sharing between the various industrial players that's going to come in, that's going to spread that price point. And that's why I think I'm trying to address a little bit of the last point on the question front. So that's where it is. Like, ship owners are looking at like where the green fuels are coming. Green fuel guys it's a chicken and egg right now, are looking at like, where are the ships? Are they going to be ready? So it's a bit of a need to unlock that investment, and it might not necessarily always need to come from the shipping sector. That's one point.
Quite interesting. I think in previous session also we were talking about this whole looking at this business model of bulk procurement, the aggregation, the co-location. Like, how do you really bring all this tied together to really see what is that business model that we talk about? Arjun, any points you have to really comment on what Jagbanta was saying? Are you still with us? Can we just bring him back online, Arjun?
Yes, Pavan, I'm right here. No, I've been listening intently to everyone's expert views on this, so appreciate everyone's comments. I'll repeat, or let's say I'll endorse what Jack just mentioned in terms of clustering. I, of course, come more from the energy side of things, so I've seen that supply side spectrum when it comes to green fuel supply, and then the maritime or the aviation spaces, for example, respectively, are taking up a lot more consumption going forward, hopefully. But the trick again is, as I think Jack was mentioning, to look at synergies. You have shared infrastructure. That's a massive synergy. You have power transmission, for example, which is not a part of the fuel producer supply chain. And the maritime, consumer, for example, is not going to look at, what's happening upstream. They will say that, look, we need fuel supply at scale, at cost, at the port or at the bunker. So we can't look at the entire supply chain in a disaggregated view. It has to be an integrated supply chain, for this to work. Now we will need gigawatts of power. We'll need several gigawatts of transmission and distribution lines. We'll need hundreds of megawatts, if not gigawatts, of electrolyzers. We'll need, billions, if not tens of billions of dollars worth of financing. And of course, we'll need millions of tons worth of demand, all of them to happen simultaneously. And, that's the trick in terms of integrating the entire value chain. Now, I'll sort of, give my final comment in terms of one major challenge, Pawan, addressing question number 3. For me, other than demand, other than the financial bits, other than the regulatory aspects, as I mentioned, in terms of alignment with Maritime Fuel EU and IMO, etc., I think the R&D part of it is significant here. I was at Cochin last week where colleagues from DG Shipping were there and, various other, very good quality discussions were happening when it came to the question of whether we in India are really manufacturing the right engines, the ships, the storage, for example, of liquid fuel at scale. I'm not talking about smaller scale, but I'm talking about, commercial scale at ports. Now, the question over there is that similar to every other sector that we think about, our spend on R&D, our focus on core deep tech research is very limited. Now, I would call for that being a very large challenge where we do not want to be dependent on East Asian technologies or let's say West European, engines, for example. But we have to create that ecosystem within India where centers of excellences and other research institutions are promoting this a lot more. So we then have a domestic supply chain of engines, of ships, of tugs, of storage devices at ports, and therefore we break away from imported technology over there as well. So I'll stop at that point, Pavan. Over to you.
Any quick reflection? We'll end the session. And Sneha,
just a point on that. One of the key things in the maritime vision happening is also a concept of maritime cluster, which is being worked on specifically to address this issue, that including centers of excellence for R&D, innovation, but maritime clusters for production and including all the aspects. Those concepts are also being looked at, because if you want to reach the 2047 vision, you do require to build that capacity in your own ecosystem. Totally agree on that point.
Thank you, Jagabanta and Arjun, for touching up the integration required necessary for this, reaching our common goal. We cannot work as silos. We have to work together. That is very, very important. So that has started right from 2021, the declaration by India as Panchamat Vision during the Glasgow in COP26, COP26. That is a common goal which we can take and proceed working together. So if we can meet those requirements, we'll be able to meet all the necessary, the requirements, whether it is IMO or it is ICAO, wherever it is. So we have to work together. That is very important. Corridors are very important. We have to spread the cost across. We cannot bear on a single sector, cannot own this. So there is a necessity for coming together. The interministerial coordination is required. The public-private partnership that is required. So having more number of debates can bring solutions, and Connect Karo can be an effective platform to bring together of all these stakeholders. Thank you so much for giving this opportunity.
Thank you so much for summarizing in a nice way. I think this is one of the first conversations on maritime that WRI is actually hosting, and we plan to build on this. Sneha, any 2 key takeaways from what you heard?
So, okay. So because I have always said that R&D at scale has been my first love and passion, me being a PhD, and obviously with the history of with Office of PSA and being witness to formulation of Anusandhan National Research Foundation. So for me, that was really important that you spoke about, sir, how the public-private partnership has to be important. And also I understand that as IMO regulations, the shipbuilders are going to be let's say, the first frontline effect. They'll be affected by that. So I was pretty happy to listen that we have the plan, and we are planning to keep that intact. And also, as rightly, when everybody was talking about green hydrogen mission, the effect of it and the integration which is required to further decarbonize the sector. So that was the key part I observed.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I missed to say one more thing, because there is a SBFA, Shipbuilding Finance Assistance Policy 2.0, which is effectively, addressing the requirements for shipbuilding, green shipbuilding. 30% subsidy is provided, from the government towards building green ships in India. And also, we have got the ship recycling credit note, that 40% is being provided for indigenous built of ships in India. Both these things will be, facilitating green shipbuilding in India. So that is also there. And as Dr. Sneha during her presentation said, 2050, yes, it is going to be, all fuels are going to be in the same platform almost, with the fossil fuels going to be little costly during that point of time. So it is very necessary that people should come forward to have more, shipbuilding in India, especially green ships. That is my point here.
Thank you so much. I think it really resonates how I was looking at the EV transition years back, that creating those supply chains, bringing manufacturing. I think a big focus to me really looks like, bringing the manufacturing in India is looking like the way really to progress, and it really aligns with our $30 trillion 2047 Viksit Bharat mission also. I think that's one clearly aspect. I also see safety as being a big challenge, that we really need to bring the codes, the standards, and how do we really big. And this whole discovery of business model, like how do you spread the cost across, like how do you really make it happen, not just because there is going to be mandates in place, but how do we proactively take these steps to really work together with different actors to bring this together, to me really lies the key. With that note, I think we are all ready for lunch. This discussion is very fascinating for me. What we thought as a 30-minute discussion is almost close to an hour. So with that, please let's give a big round of applause to Mr. Gopi Krishna, Mr. Rajiv Nair, Mr. Jagbanta, and Mr. Arjun. A small token of appreciation from II. And Arjun will hold your stuff virtually. We hand it over to you. We'll send it to you.
You can ship it to me. That's okay.